Welcome everyone. My name is MD Galvin. We're here today and we're glad that you're with us. The purpose of today's webinar is to provide you with the background information about the research agenda and then answer any questions you might have that will help you prepare your research proposal. Moving on to the next slide, I'm going to be joined by several of my colleagues during this process. Charlotte Roh, the Vice Chair of RESEC, will be talking to you about the key areas and themes of the webinar, the research agenda, and then Kara Malenfant, our staff liaison from ACRL, will be sharing information with you about preparing and submitting your proposal. And Nathan Hall, our chair, will then talk to you about some use cases that have been developed for the research agenda. Finally, we're providing ample time for all of your questions. And you can leave those at the chat at any time during the presentation, or if you come up with questions after the webinar is over, we have contact information at the end, and we will respond to your question as promptly as we can. So without further ado, let's get started. Charlotte, are you ready to get going?
I'm ready. Hi all. Forgive me for basically doing a lot of reading from the slides, as this is my first time talking about the research agenda for a crowd. So the Research and Scholarly Environment Committee, RESEC for short, supports ACRL's goal, the academic and research library workforce, accelerating the transition to more open and equitable systems of scholarship. So some of the ways that we're supporting basically ACRL's advocacy and modeling for more representative and inclusive ways of knowing, right? As well as to increase ACRL's efforts to influence and advocate for more open and equitable dissemination of policies and practices. Next slide, there's one more bullet point under this topic, which is to enhance members' capacity to address issues related to scholarly communication, including but not limited to data management, library publishing, open access, and digital scholarship and power privilege in knowledge creation systems. So it's pretty big bullet points there. Go ahead to the next slide. And we wanted to define some of these terms. Open, as we've defined it in the research agenda, it refers to removing barriers to access and encouraging use and reuse, especially of the tools of production of scholarly content and to the outputs of that work. And equitable refers to ensuring that systems, institutions, and processes function in a way that gives everyone what they need in order to successfully participate. And inclusive refers to, one, creating opportunities for greater participation in systems, institutions, and processes involved in creating, sharing, and consuming research. And two, removing barriers that can hinder such participation. And three, actively encouraging and welcoming people to participate, particularly those whose voices have often been marginalized. So in our analysis, in the research agenda, this means that we've established a better shared understanding of openness, equity, and inclusion in those three definitions, and also led us to organize the agenda around three interrelated themes: people, content, and systems. So, people. To encourage more open, inclusive, and equitable system, the first step is to focus on people who are involved in that system, with the premise that greater involvement by more people in more roles at more levels will eventually result in a fairer and more equitable system. I want to say that the three themes that I've just mentioned, people, content, and systems, they do overlap, but this was what we came up with to organize. Sorry, next slide. Yeah. So embracing diversity and inclusion, improving the working lives of people engaged in scholarly communications, and increasing awareness concerning creators' rights. Those are some of the sub-themes that came up under the theme of people. Next slide. Some of the examples are enhancing representation within libraries and creating a broader scholarly communications workforce. And creating incentives, participation, and understanding the costs of under-recognized labor for the working lives of people engaged in scholarly communications, which and also for creators' rights, retaining and protecting intellectual rights, and intentionally limiting openness and knowledge sharing when necessary. So the next theme of content, change within the scholarly communication system is needed in openness to innovative and non-traditional roles of communicating knowledge, in an emphasis on public scholarship and in developing reward mechanisms for all who participate in the research and publication process. So that means we want to rethink what counts and create more representative and open collections. Under rethinking what counts, we want to address implicit and, so that's explicit? I'm assuming that should say explicit. Explicit and implicit bias, as well as create metrics built on value rather than just metrics for metrics' sake. Under more representative and open collections, we want to ensure a diversity of collections, as well as enact effective strategies for revisiting copyright. Next slide. The last theme of systems. So many barriers could be reduced by addressing challenges related to the systems we rely on to create, produce, and distribute intellectual work. So some examples are digital infrastructure, the virtual roads and bridges where content is created, hosted, accessed, and stored, and financial systems that permit people, organizations, and companies who invest their time to be fairly compensated for their labor. Some big bullet points there as well. So some of the sub-themes under systems, supporting tech infrastructure that is sustainable, creating systems that permit more access to more people, and building mission-aligned organizational and financial systems, and advancing innovation in academic libraries. So for supporting tech infrastructure that is sustainable, we want to determine the right scale and scope for infrastructure, manage research data, and enhance discovery. Some of these are classic. And under creating systems that permit more access to more people, we want to facilitate access for those with disabilities and design systems that focus on users. Under building mission-aligned organizational and financial systems, we want to build business models to support scholarly communications and invest in community-owned infrastructure. And lastly, advancing innovation. We want to encourage technological innovation and ongoing development in order to drive transformation within libraries. So that's that for my section.
Great. So this is Kara. So I'm going to pop into the chat the URL. If you want to read the full report, you can do that. It's a free PDF, or you can purchase it in print through the ALA store. The process of creating the research agenda was over a year with lots of community input. And in addition to sort of those areas, I want to point out that each area suggests practical actions that libraries can take now, as well as identifies research that is still needed. And so ACRL really wants to make sure people take up the research agenda. So we've allocated money to offer research grants. So you can apply for a grant of up to $5,000, and you can see the URL there for the full call for proposals on our website. So you can apply by Monday, September 30th is the deadline, and then you'll be notified within about 2 months later. Those who are selected will have their grant funds dispersed within 1 month of completing an agreement form. Anyone can apply. You can apply as an individual person, you can apply with a team, you can apply with people from different institutions or different kinds of people from your institution. But in terms of eligibility, at least one person must be a member of ACRL throughout the whole research project. And at least one person on the team must be either a librarian or an information professional working in a university, college, community college, or research library at the time of the application. And then the last eligibility criterion to note is that tuition and degree-related expenses can't be covered by the grant. So to prepare a complete proposal, you'll need to go online to our website. The application form itself is online. You can find a PDF preview so you know all the questions on the form, but basically it's your name, your contact information, who your collaborators are, and then what's the membership number of the person who is an ACRL member and when do they expire. And then you'll upload a single PDF, and that will have the lead researcher's CV or resume, a brief abstract of your research proposal, the budget, and we have a worksheet listed on our website as well, so you can see what we're asking for in terms of detail. And then your project proposal itself, which should have a statement of the research objectives, the research question, discussion of your methodology, and how are you going to analyze the data that you get in. And then a little more specificity about the actual research activities you have planned, the expected outcomes and plan for dissemination, as well as the benefits of this research. And I want to note that we're really encouraging any kind of investigative method that you feel is appropriate to the research question you want to pursue. So this could be, you know, the kind of standard quantitative or qualitative approaches, but maybe you want to do some kind of a critical evaluation or a case study. Maybe you feel like a reflective essay is the best way to really examine and interrogate a question. Or maybe autoethnography. We really encourage and particularly welcome proposals that involve collaborations between librarians and other higher education stakeholders, whether that's someone from your Office of Institutional Research or a teaching faculty member or an early career researcher or an administrator, a student, whoever. So take that into account as you're thinking about the proposal you want to put forth. And I think that is the end of my section, yes? Over to Nathan. You know, I'll say we recognize that not everybody wants to be a researcher and to do research in this area. So the report certainly lays out research questions that need to be answered, but it also does suggest some practical actions, some things people can do right now that emerged from the process of writing the research agenda, things that came out as promising or effective practices that we can all do right now. And so Nathan will talk a little bit more about how you can apply what's in that report in your library, whether you decide to do research or not.
All right, thank you, Kara. Let's see, yes, I am no longer muted. Okay, so for the academic year 2018-2019, our committee, Research in Scholarly Environments of ACRL, put forth proposed an emerging leaders project, which was taken up by a group. And it was Carrie Didion of Governor State, Sheila Garcia of University of Michigan, Kim Haynes of University of North Carolina, and Teresa Schultz of University of Nevada at Reno. I saw Carrie on the call. She's excused from being put on the spot because she's muted, and I don't think, we didn't give her any warning. So the project resulted in, we asked them to look at different kinds of ways that people from in different roles and from different kinds of institutions could engage with the project and either apply for a research grant or even take on a research project that's not funded. That's a slide for myself. So for the use cases that they came up with, they broke it down into a matrix of library staff, of roles and institution types. And for each of these roles, they examined how someone at one of these institution types could an example of a project they could do. And these are not hard categories set in stone. Obviously, someone from a different role or from a different institution type could engage with the research agenda, but in the ways that are prescribed. But they're just kind of meant to inspire people to take up the research agenda in some way that they might not have previously imagined. So this is the poster they presented. And as you can see, they broke it up into large research category universities in the top left and community colleges in the top right, minority serving institutions in the bottom right, and small universities and liberal arts colleges in the bottom left. And then the color codes for each of the bubbles shows the kind of role that they might play in their university, in their institution, whether it's an administrator or public service librarian, technical service librarians, or paraprofessionals and non-librarian staff. Now, staff in their work is differentiated from librarian. And I know that librarians and information professionals are classified differently in different institutions, and that librarian and library staff are used interchangeably in some contexts. In this case, staff is in an appointment or role that some might characterize as paraprofessional or associate professional. And then to define minority serving institutions, we're particularly thinking about historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, Asian American and Native American Pacific Islander serving institutions, and tribal colleges. So again, this is just the bubbles here indicate who and where who might ask such a question and where such a question might be asked. But these are not hard, mutually exclusive categories. It's just a visual aid to inspire questions and engagement from people who might not usually engage in this kind of work, because we do really feel that the research agenda will be most successful if the research comes out of it represents diverse perspectives. And they also put together a report that's linked from the next slide, and it's also linked from the ACRL Insider announcement for this presentation. But to give some examples for some of the kinds of research that could come out of the project, out of the research agenda, or kinds of projects that people could propose. So for technical services staff or personnel at a research university, would be to examine the collection diversity and purchase models used through vendor profiles. So some institutions rely on vendor collection profiles for purchasing, and this model saves time compared to purchasing items, but directly influences the diversity of collections. Research opportunities around this topic would include undertaking a study on the ways libraries rely on vendor profiles and how diverse the books in these profiles actually are, and the extent to which content selected through a vendor profile lends to or may prohibit diversity of collections, and examining how libraries broach the topic of building diverse collections when creating vendor profiles. So that's one example for technical services, which obviously in this case would be more on the collections management side rather than the metadata side. In another example, for library staff at a community college, again, that's staff as in referring to the a role that a non-credentialed person would be qualified for. This project would be around OER interaction. So what role do library staff at community colleges play in the development and management of OERs and dissemination of OERs on their campus? So this project could consist of surveying library staff about what day-to-day work they do and in what areas, such as course reserves or et cetera, are related to OERs. The project could also investigate if staff notice any trends among which instructors use OERs and how that compares with self-reported information from faculty. So these are some examples that came out of the Emerging Leaders work, and we're hoping that this will serve the people that are interested in this grant program to determine, hey, might be a way. There are people that are interested in pursuing a project but not really sure where to get started. So hope we can provide some ways that might inspire, some paths to inspire people to take up different questions. And those are the links to the report and to the poster, which since the recording will be online, you'll be able to look at this more later and type these in, or maybe I'll have it up for a few more seconds to do a screenshot. But from here, we do move to questions. So we're ready to take your questions. And now I'm going to look at the chat and see if there's anything I missed or whether you could hear me at all for the last 5 minutes. So,
Nathan, there were a few questions that came up. The first one was part of openness is open peer review and the publishing of peer reviews with the main content. Is that being considered in some of these proposals that could be put forward?
I think that could be a competitive application question, yes. I think open reviews have been discussed in some of these venues for a while, and as an alternative for content and systems, especially when the people, content, and systems breakdown, this would adjust such a study would explore more about the systems for disseminating and managing scholarly communication and what gets published and what are opaque and transparent processes for scholarship. So thank you for that question.
And this is Kara. I'll just chime in from my perspective to say that in terms of the criteria for selection, I would just encourage you to read the call for proposals, because you'll really want to make sure that whatever you propose in that area really aligns with what's identified as a priority in the report itself. And I think you can make that argument, but just take a look and make sure that you're clear about that connection, that the monetary support is going to help the research be done, that it's needed, that it's original enough, and that what you would find would fill an existing gap or provide a new way of investigating a question.
Great. If you have any follow-up, the person who asked that question, feel free to put it in the chat box, or anyone else who has a question, you can put them in the chat box now. We did get another question, which was, when does the life of the grant end, and when is a final report due?
That's an interesting question. I'll let Kara answer the first part of that.
Yeah, I think, we anticipate that most projects would be about 12 months long, but if for some reason, it depends on your research design. If for some reason it's going to be shorter or longer, explain why it is. We disperse the funds up front. So as soon as you've been selected and you sign the agreement form, we give you the money. And then we ask you to provide an interim report at 6 months. And I truly don't know off the top of my head when the final report is due. I'd have to dig around and look at our documentation. Probably depends based on when your research is done.
And we discussed some other avenues for dissemination beyond those final reports, where we're going to try to put in a session for ACRL 2021. To have a session there where we could do a panel from some of the grant recipients, so they would get a conference presentation out of it, and also but we still have to propose that session. And then
Nathan, if I could just interrupt, someone's saying it's a little hard to hear you, so you might want to get the microphone a little closer to your mouth.
Well, it's built into the machine, so I can just. Is this better?
You sound fine to me, but hopefully, Amanda, that helps. Go ahead.
I'll try to speak more slowly. So one option for dissemination is through the ACRL 2021 conference. We would make a group presentation for some of the grant recipients to present there as panelists. And another one is that we are in talks with Wendy Aaron Casper, the editor of College and Research Libraries, to do a special issue about the research projects that come out of this. And that would be probably 2022, I think, is what we're looking at for a schedule. So those are options for project dissemination beyond the final reports.
So I hope we answered that question fully, but if not, please feel free to type in additional follow-up questions so we can get to those too.
So there were a couple other parts about that came up in that same question. Kara, you answered them in the chat, but just to let people know, if you have more than 3 collaborators, you can certainly just include that into the text of your grant proposal. Another question that we got was, will the grant support a project that proposes to work with librarians in the Global South?
Yes, international applications are welcome, but one member has to be, to go back to the selection criteria, this did come up, eligibility. So yes, so you have to have one ACRL member throughout the project lifecycle, and you have to have at least one librarian or information professional in one of these categories: university, college, community college, or research library. But yes, international groups are allowed.
It then came up asking whether we were publishing open access as a requirement for the expected outcomes, and if, that same questioner then realized, of course, that is included in our criteria. So I just wanted to let everyone know that that's part of it. we were asked, do you think that this is a fundable topic? How academic research libraries can be included into grant-funded research activities to support emerging interdisciplinary research, especially in biomedical and health sciences?
I'd have to know a bit more, but I don't see anything in there that would prohibit it. I think that fits into the research systems part of the agenda, so that sounds okay. Yes.
Well, we are all caught up with the questions that are in the chat box. So if you have something percolating, feel free to pop it in there right now so that we can answer your question. And if you are still kind of rethinking it and you need more time, always know that you can contact us at any time. Yes, we would definitely be willing to discuss ideas offline. And I think you can see that Kara's now posted a FAQ that will help you, you know, find out more, answer some more questions that you have. We're on a recording, so I don't want to include too much dead air in it, but are there any other questions that we, yes. What do you think of the role of academic libraries in supporting translational research, thank you, as a research topic for the grant?
I think that would depend on the definition of translational research. As long as it aligns with the research agenda, that would be fine.
And I think it's important to note for people that, you know, we're not telling you what you should look at, but rather that there's a certain kind of approach that we, or a certain area that we think is open for it. The kind of topic that you might choose or the lens that you would look at would not be restricted. Is that correct?
That's correct. So if you're doing a rather traditional research, you might want to look at, you know, how does that expand previous definitions? How does it expand the boundaries of what's previously been considered possible? And what's does it make research more equitable? And then if you're proposing sort of a non-traditional method, that might give you more leeway in proposing a more traditional topic. So, and those aren't hard and fast rules. It's just maybe a guideline off the top of my head that might be helpful. There's a question about the budget and what can be covered and what cannot, and it's probably a question for Kara.
Sure. So there's a little bit more discussion of that on our website, which I'm going to go to right now so I don't misspeak. Because the budget worksheet does have some examples. So, you know, really any items that are related specifically to the proposed research. So it could be wages for personnel. Maybe you need to hire someone who's a data analyst who can do something that you don't have the skills to do. Maybe you need to take a site visit. Maybe you need to travel and go somewhere to do some aspect of your research study. Maybe there's some specific technology you need to have access to that you don't have, or some other kind of tool or material. General and overhead operating expenses, other indirect costs like that are not funded. We won't fund those, so please don't include those with your budget request. But do let us know, you know, what other sorts of tools or support, or maybe you need to, maybe someone's on a 9-month contract and you need to provide a stipend over the summer so that they can do some work. Things like that are all acceptable. Do note, though, that travel to disseminate, conference travel, that kind of thing should not be included in this budget. All grant recipients will have access to receive reimbursement in the future for up to $1,500 in dissemination costs. And so that will be spelled out a little more for those who receive the awards, but you don't have to include dissemination costs in your proposed budget request. So I hope that's helpful. If there was something in particular you had in mind about a cost that would or wouldn't be included, feel free to type it in chat or send us an email.
One is in there right now about the traveling to locations to do focus groups or interviews, and that seems.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, explain in your proposal why that is necessary. You know, why that's an integral piece of the design. You know, maybe it's the particular population you're studying. You need to go there, and being there in person is much more effective than virtually, or whatever your reason is. Just explain, you know, why that is part of your research design and estimate what your travel costs would be.
Well, it looks like most people are getting their questions answered. Few people are starting to leave feeling like they've gotten their questions answered. And we would assure you that you would get a full and complete answer if you have specific questions for us offline. The last slide of the presentation has all our email addresses, and feel free to reach out. Anything else that you wanted to say, Nathan or Charlotte or Kara?
Just thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to your proposals.
Yeah, we're very excited.
Yeah, I think the committee spent so much time, you know, working with the consultants to come up with the research agenda, and now we're just so eager to see what happens, how you guys use it, what you do with it. So please do propose something.
All right, well, thank you all for attending, and we'll look forward to seeing your proposals. Bye-bye.